tonight, His Majesty returns home after meetings in Morocco and a visit to Scotland, where he was guest of honour at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, with the participation of world military bands, including Jordan. Hundreds of thousands of Turks gather in Istanbul to denounce a failed military coup, and Erdogan invites the heads of opposition to address the crowds to show a unified nation. Belgium's Prime Minister Charles Michel says his country is facing a new situation in security following an attack on police yesterday claimed by Daesh. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty returned home following a visit to Morocco and Scotland. In Morocco, His Majesty met with Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz, and in Scotland, where he was accompanied by Queen Rania, His Majesty attended the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo as a guest of honour. The 67th military show is being held at the UK historic Edinburgh Castle, where the participation of military bands from around the globe, including Jordan. The Royal Jordanian Honour Guard, Silent Drill Team, the Jordanian Armed Forces Band, the Royal Guards Brigade and the Circassian Guards are representing the kingdom in the festival, which coincides with the Jordan celebration of the Great Arab Revolt Centennial. King Abdullah also attended a reception hosted by the Governor of Edinburgh Castle in honour of His Majesty in the presence of 120 people. Ahead of the event, King Abdullah met with Secretary of State for Defence Michael Fallon and discussed ways to boost bilateral cooperation between the two countries in the military, defence and training fields. Discussions also covered regional issues, mainly efforts to fight terrorism. Over to Syria, and fighting continued in southwest Aleppo after opposition factions including Nusra Front broke the siege of rebel-held eastern Aleppo. Rebels have taken most of a large government military complex southwest of Aleppo city in a major offensive that began on Friday to break a month-long siege and are now attacking further into government-held territories. The surprise advance allowed fighters from insurgent areas in western Syria to break through a strip of government-controlled territories yesterday and connect with fighters in the encircled sector of eastern Aleppo. But fierce fighting and continuous Russian and Syrian airstrikes in and around the Ramusa area has prevented safe passage for besieged East Aleppo residents, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Some media have played down the rebel gain and say Syrian army efforts have caused rebels to withdraw from some recently gained areas, but fears are growing in government-held western Aleppo that it might become besieged by rebels as the main route south of Damascus for goods transport has been cut. The observatory said the news of the rebel advance caused food prices to rise by as much as 4 times in western Aleppo. And near the Syrian-Iraqi border, Daesh suicide bombers attacked a military base for US-backed fighters, leaving several dead before blowing themselves up. Rebel sources said the dawn attack on the military camp near the Syrian Al-Tanf border crossing with Iraq involved at least one explosive-laden vehicle that rammed the gate of the base. The base, which was set up by the New Syria Army, which was formed around 18 months ago using insurgents driven from eastern Syria at the height of Daesh's rapid expansion in 2014. Jets from the US-led coalition shortly after struck at several vehicles believed to be driven by Daesh members in the desert area. Elsewhere in Syria, an airstrike on a hospital in the northwestern part left at least 10 people dead, but according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, it was not clear what aircraft carried out the strike. The hospital in the town of Melis is about 15 kilometers from Idlib city in rebel-held Idlib province and is one of the many other healthcare centers that have been the target of attacks. The Syrian army and the opposition both deny hitting the hospitals. Medical charity, the Syrian American Medical Society, said that July was the worst month for attacks on healthcare centers since the beginning of Syria's 5-year-old conflict. Back here at home, Interior Minister Salam Hamad told outgoing representative of the UN Refugee Agency to Jordan, Andrew Harper, that the government continues to address the Syrian refugee crisis within a holistic and coordinated approach involving the various authorities. Hamad said the kingdom has and continues to provide all sorts of assistance to the refugees to ease their plight, adding that Jordan and the UNHCR are bound by a strategic relation, the UN agency being recognized the international umbrella for refugee affairs. For his part, Harper voiced dissatisfaction with the level of cooperation by Jordanian officials and competent authorities with the UNHCR.
My question to the Israeli people and the Israeli government is, who supports farmers, fishermen, sick people and helps children psychologically? Does that mean he supports terrorism? All these accusations are false.
هو يدعم الإرهاب. يعني كل هذه الادعاءات ادعاءات باطلة.
Palestinians staged a protest in front of Gaza's World Vision office to support the charity's local manager who was arrested by Israel in June after he was accused of funding Hamas. Last Thursday, Israel accused the US-based Christian relief group World Vision's manager of operations in Gaza, Mohammed al-Halabi, of funneling millions of dollars in aid money to Hamas. The protesters expressed solidarity with Halabi and demanded his release. Jerusalem-based lawyer Mohammed Mahmoud, who was assigned to defend Halabi by the charity group, said Halabi denied all the accusations. World Vision earlier said it was shocked by the Israeli claims, adding that while it had no reason to believe them to be true, it would review the evidence. Hamas was also denied any connection with Halabi. A Saudi-led military coalition carried out around 30 airstrikes throughout Yemen a day after UN talks on ending the war expired without achieving results. The bombing were aimed at Yemen's armed Houthi movement in Sana'a, Saada, Jauf, Hajjah and Ta'az provinces, stretching from the country's far north to coastal south. There were no immediate reports of casualties in the strikes, which were carried out largely in remote war zones. But on battlefronts in two areas northeast of the capital Sana'a and in South Baida province, local officials said about 40 fighters were killed from both sides in renewed clashes. Nearly 3 months of negotiations in Kuwait helped to reduce the level of fighting that had killed at least 6,400 people and unleashed a humanitarian crisis. Summoned by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, hundreds of thousands of Turks gathered in Istanbul to denounce a failed military coup. The rally, named Democracy and Martyrs, followed 3 weeks of nightly demonstrations in squares around the country by supporters of Erdogan. Erdogan invited the heads of the secularist and nationalist opposition to address the crowds to show a unified nation in defiance of Western criticism of his intolerance to dissent. Prime Minister Binali Yildirim told the rally that US-based cleric Fethullah Gulen, whom he accused of staging the coup, would be brought to Turkey and pay the price for the coup attempt. Tens of thousands of people have been suspended, detained or placed under investigation since the plot, including soldiers, police, judges, journalists, medics and civil servants. Meanwhile, Austrian Foreign Minister Sebastian Kurz has threatened to block the expansion of negotiations with Turkey on its accession to the European Union. Talks on Turkish accession to the EU began in 2005, but only 1 out of 35 chapters or policy areas where Turkey must adopt and implement EU rules has been concluded. On Friday, German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said accession talks were as good as deadlocked, but he rejected calls to halt them entirely, and today Vice-Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel said he believed Turkey was unlikely to join the EU for decades. A crackdown by the Turkish government on followers of cleric Gulen, blamed for last month's failed coup, has strained relations with the bloc, and a migration agreement between Brussels and Ankara now lies in the balance. Belgium's Prime Minister Charles Michel said his country is facing a new situation in security following an attack on police yesterday claimed by Daesh. The attack by a machete-wielding man in Charleroi left 2 female police officers seriously injured before the attacker was shot dead. "We are alert. We know we are facing a new situation in Europe in recent months, and that is not exclusively a Belgian situation," said Michel. Shortly before Daesh claimed the attack, Belgian prosecutors had identified the assailant as a 33-year-old Algerian, KB, who had lived in Belgium since 2012. Belgium and its capital Brussels, which houses European Union institutions and the headquarters of NATO, are currently on a security alert level of 3 out of a maximum of 4. The death toll as a result of floods that hit the Macedonian capital Skopje following torrential rain has risen to 20, with some of the victims drowning in their cars. Part of the city's ring road was swept away in the floods, dragging cars into nearby fields, and according to weather forecast, more heavy rain is expected. Here's more.
Water levels are receding in the Macedonian capital of Skopje, where residents are waking up to the aftermath of an overnight storm. Torrential rains created flash floods that swept cars through the streets, leaving debris scattered everywhere. The anguish clear as bodies were discovered. Officials say at least 17 people died and warned the number could still rise. Overnight, tractors and trucks were called in to help residents who had to fight through rushing floodwaters to get to safety. Police say 22 people were also hurt. And as cleanup gets underway, residents are already preparing for another onslaught of rain, forecast for Sunday evening.
An art gallery in the Venezuelan capital is honoring the late Mexican artist Frida Kahlo with an exposition featuring the work of 50 female Venezuelan artists that pay homage to the Mexican legend. The exhibit, entitled Always Frida, is being displayed at the Florida Art Gallery in Caracas and is making the 109th anniversary of Kahlo's birth. Kahlo is among Mexico's most famous artists. Her reputation has bloomed in the last decade with shows in Mexico and internationally. As a child, Khalo suffered a bout of polio that left one of her legs thinner. At 18, she was in a bus accident that broke her spine in 3 places. Khalo later died at the age of 47. Thousands of visitors began flooding into the Olympic Park for the second day of the 2016 Summer Games in Rio de Janeiro. Despite the scorching temperatures, the excitement was in the air as fans dressed in their country's colors and draped themselves in flags to cheer on their athletes. The first day of the Games got off to a shaky start, with fans queuing for hours to enter the park, some missing their events as many athletes competed in front of empty stands. But today, there was no long queues and the Olympic spirit was alive and well. In the final of the women's 400-meter individual medley. She finished in 4 minutes and 26 seconds in a grueling event where swimmers complete successive legs in butterfly, backstrokes, breaststrokes, and freestyles. And finally, moderate weather prevails in most regions for the rest of tonight, with partly cloudy skies and northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, normal summer conditions continue across the kingdom, but it remains hot in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, with northwesterly moderate to brisk winds raising dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect high temperatures tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a recap of our top stories. His Majesty returns home after meetings in Morocco and a visit to Scotland, where he was guest of honour at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo with the participation of world military bands, including Jordan. Hundreds of thousands of Turks gather in Istanbul to denounce a failed military coup, and Erdogan invites the heads of opposition to address the crowds to show a unified nation. Belgium's Prime Minister Charles Michel says his country is facing a new situation in security following an attack on police yesterday claimed by Daesh. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.